All right, so as we learned yesterday, millions of these pages being released. A lot to discuss here, so let's bring in Kelly Hyman, trial attorney. Thank you so much for joining us this morning on Live Now from Fox.
Good morning.
All right, well, let's just jump right into it. We do know there's a lot of information to comb through here, but initially, was there anything new that really stuck out to you about this?
It's about accountability. When you look at these documents, we have to remember that millions came out, and this is the biggest dump of documents that's been since this act. Now, what was this act about? The files were to help make sure that there was transparency. These are the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which was put out there for the American people in order to have transparency. Majority of the American people supported the idea that these files came out to the public. When we look at the files on the document, what really stands out to me from a legal perspective, that one of the documents was a indictment. Now, it was a draft indictment against Epstein and co-conspirators. It never made the light of day, but it makes you think about, from a legal standpoint, who else was involved in this and why weren't they charged? Now, for the survivors, this act was for the survivors, and we always have to remember that justice for the survivors is key.
Now, when we talk about this release, what does this actually mean in terms of a legal standpoint here? Does it really change anything at all?
It could potentially change. Now, we have to remember that the Department of Justice can bring charges, but there's been no charges so far in regards to the Epstein files or the documents as well. The survivors want justice for them. The survivors want accountability for them. As someone who represents victims of sex trafficking, human trafficking, what they go through is horrific. And we also have to remember that when these documents come out as well, there has been some documents that had their name in them, and they had to come forward and say, please don't put my name out in the public, and please redact it. Also, some of the survivors have felt that there hasn't been full transparency because a lot of the documents have been redacted, and they want to make sure that the public and the people who did this are held accountable for their actions.
Now, Kelly, you mentioned the Epstein Files Transparency Act. I want to talk about that a little bit. What does that compel the government to reveal? And really, just as importantly here, what does it make sure stays secret as of right now?
According to the act, now we have to remember that this was a bipartisan act. So it was on both sides of the aisle, and a majority of the American people supported it. According to the act, the Department of Justice was compelled to produce documents in regards to Epstein and also Maxwell as well. Now, it's important to remember that the Department of Justice could have produced these documents. In regards to the privilege, there are certain types of privilege, attorney-client privilege. There's also privilege to potentially, if there's some kind of ongoing investigation, in order to protect that as well. Now, documents have been held back, over 200,000 documents based on a type of privilege. The Department of Justice has said that it has produced all the documents in regards to its compliance with the law and is not going to be producing any additional documents.
Now, going back a little bit, Congress set a December 19th deadline that the Justice Department, as we saw, missed. So legally speaking, are there going to be any repercussions from that?
There could be potential repercussions for it for not complying with the law, whether it's a civil lawsuit or holding people in the Department of Justice in contempt. However, the Department of Justice argues that this was a huge task, that they were trying to get the information out as soon as possible. There was millions of documents for them to go through, and also sensitive documents, in order to make sure that they protect the survivors, that they protect the victims, and they wanted to make sure that that information was redacted. It was a huge task, and they got it done as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I just quickly wanted to just ask a follow-up question on that. How much discretion does the government have when deciding what to redact in that effort to protect victims or ongoing investigations?
It has a tremendous amount. Now, we also have to remember that the certain documents that have been redacted, the Oversight Committee has asked for a full version of the documents. And what that means is not only the redacted documents, but also the unredacted documents so they can see exactly what those documents say as well. But the Department of Justice ultimately decides on what documents are in fact privileged. In other words, can't be disclosed, such as attorney-client communications or some type of ongoing investigation. Ultimately, it's their decision.
And before I let you go here, what should the public really be focusing on or looking at here as we await potentially more files to come out? Or what should they be looking at with what we did see released yesterday?
To remember what the act was for. It was for transparency. It was for the American people to know exactly what happened, but it's also for the survivors to hold those people accountable for those actions. Now, the survivors have said that they have compiled their own list of powerful people that were involved. And if it's not disclosed, that they potentially might disclose it, because ultimately they want to hold them accountable for their actions, because no one should be above the law.
All right, Kelly Hyman, thank you so much, as always, for coming on live now from Fox this morning. We appreciate it.
Great to see you.